let's talk about what in the world is really cost segregation. What's up, guys? Welcome to Lionshare Bookkeeping Landlord CFO. I'm Ben Day, and we like to talk about the truth behind real estate investing in regards to accounting, finance, back office, and automation. And today, we're going to spend a significant amount of time talking about technically none of those things. Today, we're going to talk about cost segregation. What is it? Why is it not accounting, tax, finance, back office, or automation? And how can you begin to use it in your taxes and finances to the greatest power and effect? Who's it for? Who's it not for? And let's get right into it. Now, first and foremost, I am not a tax professional. I'm also not a professional engineer. The last thing you want me doing is swinging a hammer. So if you are interested in getting more information about cost segregation, we've partnered with some cost segregation firms. Check out a link down below in the notes where we can begin to help you get connected with folks who really know what they're doing, who we trust, and we've seen great results from. Now, generally speaking, when we think about cost segregation, it is important for us to understand a little bit about depreciation. In effect, whenever we go and we buy a property, we're allowed to claim some of the cost of that acquisition as depreciation over the next X number of years, right? The standard is like 27 and a half years for like a single family or small multifamily. And that number can be bigger or smaller depending on a bunch of factors. Really, truly, a bunch of math nerds or actuaries got in a room together. They looked at everything you could possibly buy for a business, and they decided how long that thing would be useful. So if it's something like a desk or a computer, it might be 7 years, it might be 3 years. If it's something like a property, it could be 27 years, it could be 50 years, right? All over the map on depreciation. However, what we began to realize is that inside of a building, there's a lot more than just the building. Like, you're not going to keep the same, hopefully not going to keep the same coat of paint in a building for 30 years, right? You're not going to keep the same hardware. You just can't. Like, it's not going to be the same sheetrock, the same outlets. It's not going to be the same stuff over 3 decades. It's going to get updated. It's going to need to be fixed. And especially when we buy these properties, they're probably, especially if you're buying them as value add deals, you're going to need to fix them up. And so cost segregation came into play as an option for real estate investors to recoup some of these costs, both on the existing stuff inside the property when it's purchased and on replacing it with new stuff. And that's really where we like cost segregation, is that it provides a massive amount of tax benefit through depreciation to real estate investors. But the only way that you can get it is by having a professional engineer that with all kinds, and like, it's an unregulated industry. So you'll want to see if you can get somebody with all the like certifications and stuff that they need until it becomes regulated. It's not as of right now, but God willing, it will be at some point, to make this all easier. But you're going to want somebody who isn't a tax professional, but is like a professional engineer to come in, measure the whole property, and begin to give you the real breakdown on your costs and your allocations, and help you begin to do some really fun math once they've actually measured the property. So really, there's 3 important things that you need to understand about cost segregation. Is that number one, cost segregation is not just magic extra expenses. Like, it doesn't just magically mean that you owe a whole lot less in taxes this year. That's not what cost segregation is. What it is really is that if you went and you purchased $1 million building, it's not the land, let's just say it's the building, and you get a cost segregation study on it, there's a good chance that inside of that building, they're going to find everything that should be depreciated over 27 and a half years. And then they're going to find everything that should be depreciated or could be depreciated over less than 27 and a half years. Things like outlets, things like light fixtures, things like furniture, all of this extra stuff that's in the house that if you turn the house upside down and shook it real hard, it's not the stuff that would fall out. It's the stuff that's like bolted to the building, right? It's part of the structure, the wiring, the electrical, all of that stuff. Your cost seg study is going to go in, find all of that stuff. And instead of spreading that $1 million acquisition over 27 years, you can instead shift a lot of that depreciation to the very beginning of that time frame. So instead of taking $1 million over 27 years, you might get 100,000 up front, and then the remainder of the depreciation as normal. So you have less depreciation over the long term, but a whole bunch up front. And that is a really, really powerful way, especially if you're like transitioning, you have a high paying W-2, but you know you want to be full-time real estate. Once you get this apartment finished, you can get a cost seg study done, have all this extra depreciation up front to offset your W-2. And then as soon as you're full-time real estate, you no longer have the W-2. You might have a little bit less in depreciation over the life, but you also don't have the huge W-2 you need to replace. And you've got all this extra income coming in over here, and you've effectively done some really powerful tax planning through cost segregation. But again, like, it's still $1 million building. You don't get to have a cost seg done and now it's like worth $1.2 million and you get an extra 200 grand for free and then you still depreciate $1 million. That's not how this works. You're really just shifting all of that depreciation up into the front. There's always going to be a little bit left over that trickles out over the rest of the property life, but we're trying to cram as much of that as we can up front when we need it the most, which is usually right now. The next thing that we need to know about cost segregation is that it should absolutely be done by an engineering firm, a professional engineering firm that specializes in cost segregation and is doing the absolute most to get as certified as they possibly can and provide as much service as they can on your properties. Like I had mentioned, cost segregation, as of this recording right now, isn't exactly regulated. It became a service that real estate investors could really take advantage of in the last few years. And so it's really kind of ramped up in popularity, but there is just no regulating body to say, hey, this engineer doesn't know what they're doing. You can't do cost seg. So you could absolutely hire somebody's kid brother to come out with their measuring tape and a Polaroid and do a little measurements and put it all in a spreadsheet and put something together for you. But then you could get audited. And at the end of the day, it is your name and your tax preparer's name on that audit, not the cost seg guy. And so if you are looking for a great and fun time and having legal action in order to save a buck on a cost seg study, you feel free to do that. Like, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. But we absolutely recommend that you go with professional cost segregation firms that really know what they're doing and begin to actually break this apart for you and document it and provide ongoing support for you as well in the event that you ever have any questions. Number 3 on our list for cost segregation is that this really needs to be done on larger acquisitions. This is like doing a cost seg on a $60,000 property just doesn't make sense. I'm an Oklahoma boy. You can trip over $60,000 properties all day long. At the end of the day, and it just makes sense. You're paying for a professional engineer that they sometimes make hundreds of dollars an hour to come out and spend a day pulling apart your property. And your fee for that is going to be their travel and their time, and probably some profit for the business on top of that. That's just how business works. And so what you're looking at is it's a price tag with a comma on it all the time. Like, if it's less than $2,000, that'd be a miracle. I've seen cost segregation studies in the tens of thousands of dollars. And so fundamentally, if you're going to have somebody come out and look at a property for 10 grand, let's say, just spitballing, every price is different. Shop around. I'm not quoting a service right now. But if you're going to spend hypothetically 10 grand to have a professional come out and not generate extra expenses, just move them all into a period, we want to make sure that the ROI on that is pristine, which means fundamentally that, like, I don't want to move, $50,000 worth of useful life into 1 month. I want to move like $200,000 of useful life, or $100,000, or like $500,000. I want to have a really big bang for my buck on that professional service. And honestly, most cost seg providers that do this professionally and really know what they're doing and are upfront about it are going to frame this like an ROI. They're going to say, hey, listen, if you gave us $5 grand, we're estimating that we could find anywhere from $15,000 to $45,000 worth of benefit here for you, or whatever number it is. And I'm not saying that those numbers are good or bad. I'm just saying that at some point you should absolutely begin to see a multiple on that, and it should be a pretty critical tool for you. You can get a cost seg done within a pretty wide window of property ownership, all things considered, right? Especially when, like, the tax law can change. So sometimes, like, this, at some point, I'm sure this video will be out of date, but as of right now, fairly positive that, like, you can and should get a cost seg if you need a whole bunch of extra depreciation right now for your income situation. It's just a really powerful method, but only if you have these larger properties. If you're going for a smaller property, we don't recommend cost seg just because there's not enough meat on the bone. However, that doesn't mean that you can entirely discount this strategy either. Instead of paying for a professional engineering firm, we would recommend really leaning into some other tax laws like Section 179 or bonus depreciation, what have you, where instead of having a professional engineer be accountable for all of that information and pay the fees, you can do something more like fantastic bookkeeping where you're really personally tracking what personal property you're putting into a building and being able to depreciate that effectively, or just claim it all in the right way without tanking your ability to get loans. So if you've got a bigger property, this is best. If you've got smaller properties, it might be worth looking at your bookkeeping procedures to figure out how you can best maximize this. So in the comments below, let me know what you think. Let me know what you found most helpful, what you'd like to hear more about. We'll just cut you another video. It'd be my pleasure. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next video.